The Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate is a gaming phone that refines on the design of last year's Phone 6, bringing back its stylish design with an LED indicator on the back, its giant 6,000 mAh battery, and a highly responsive touchscreen, and then cranking up the specs and software to fill it with tons of ways to customize how you play games on it. Also, it's a phone. And as a phone, it's got Android 13, a tall 6.78-inch display, Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip that we're seeing on the phones like the Galaxy S23 and OnePlus 11, speedy 65-watt charging, and a 50-megapixel lens on its main camera. You could even get the phone with a monstrous 16 gigs of RAM, which is more memory than comes with most PCs. But what sets this particular Asus gaming phone apart from more mainstream phones, and even other gaming phones that I've tested, is a laundry list of gaming-specific features that allows for customizing how the phone responds to different games. First, before I get to the phone itself, I have to talk about the packaging of the Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate. This thing looks like a tank. Asus says it's 100% recyclable, and when you set up the phone, you use a piece of it as a sort of tutorial for getting to know the phone's features. It's essentially an unboxing minigame that you'll probably only play once, but it establishes the personality that Asus brings into the phone. The Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate takes a horizontal-first approach to its design and features, some of which carries over from last year's Phone 6. It includes 2 USB-C ports, one along the bottom like we traditionally see, and one on the left side of the phone's body. Both ports allow for charging and for outputting video onto another display. The side-mounted port also supports accessories made by Asus, such as their Aero Active cooler fan. When you're holding the device horizontally, you can program the sensors in the corners to respond as shoulder buttons, which is common in the gaming phone space, but you can also use Asus's Air Trigger system to program in motion controls or other button combinations as needed on a game-by-game basis. For instance, when playing Fortnite, I set the right shoulder to be my fire button instead of tapping the screen, and I set the left shoulder button to bring me in and out of aiming modes. The additional options involving the gyroscope are nice, and I understand that the gaming audience that gets into these devices often like to proactively tweak, but I wish the software included recommendations for popular games as a starter point that I could then tweak on top of. Like with other gaming phones, spec'd out like the Phone 7, any game that I tested on the phone loads quickly and can be set to its highest graphic settings without any issues. Setting up Fortnite to run at 90 frames per second with other graphic settings turned up didn't bog down the phone, nor doing the same with Mortal Kombat, which supports 160 frames per second. Even games that don't support beyond 60 frames per second still benefit from the newer Snapdragon processor and the phone's memory. For instance, Marvel Snap's cards animate very smoothly, as does playing Mario Kart. With this year's phone, Asus put some focus on how the phone manages games alongside other tasks, such as a game in which a character is doing a repetitive task in the background over and over and over again. You can let the game run either in the background while that task happens, or the phone will dim its screen into a sort of standby mode that can be unlocked with a 2-finger tap. This way, if a player sets up a macro in order to make a game do a repeating action, it doesn't have to tie up your phone completely. Asus also includes a cooling system within the phone to help keep heat at bay when playing for a long time, which I found to reach temperatures of roughly 40 degrees Celsius, roughly 104 degrees Fahrenheit, after 20 to 30 minutes of gameplay. That's according to the gauge provided by Asus in its software. When pairing up the phone with the Aero Active cooler, the phone's temperature stayed at roughly 38 degrees Celsius during my testing. Asus says they designed the cooling attachment to directly connect to the phone's CPU to more directly alleviate heat from it. The cooling accessory also adds a few extra customizable buttons, but I do find it feels like attaching a big metal spider to the back of the phone. Photography is generally not the reason to buy a gaming phone, but the Asus phone can definitely take decent pictures with its 50 megapixel main sensor, 13 megapixel ultra-wide and 8 megapixel macro camera. The front camera has a 32 megapixel sensor too, but you shouldn't expect photography that rivals the Pixel 7 Pro nor the Galaxy S23 Ultra. The cameras can also record video at 8K resolution and 24 frames per second. Coming down to 4K, the cameras can record at 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second. Other pluses on the phone include the stereo front-facing speakers, a headphone jack, an in-screen fingerprint sensor, and for those that don't mind the small forehead bezel on the top of the phone, placing the front-facing camera within that so that way there's no design cut out for the camera interrupting gameplay. The phone also will get 2 major software updates and 4 years of security updates. The Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate is filled with power and customizable features tailored for mobile phone gamers that want to tweak Android games while playing them at their highest graphic settings. New additions like the phone's new Snapdragon chip, controller options, and upgraded cooling system further refine that experience while providing a sharp refresh rate with fast speeds that benefit non-gaming tasks like apps and reading too. However, most people will likely remain happier with a mainstream phone like a Galaxy S23 if the main reason for wanting a premium device is to have a better camera or a phone with a slimmer body. Also, many Android games run just fine on mainstream phones, just not at the highest graphic settings or frame rates. But for a gamer that puts these specs above all and wants lots and lots of customizable options, this ROG Phone 7 Ultimate is packed with them. What do you think of the Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate? Is it the kind of phone you would want to consider, or are you looking at other ways to play games like the Steam Deck? Tell us in the comments, and stay tuned to CNET for more phone reviews like these.